There are businesses doing remarkable work every single day. They solve difficult problems, they take care of their customers, they employ great people, they contribute to their communities, and almost nobody knows they exist. Meanwhile, another business with half the experience, a third of the expertise, and a founder who posts motivational quotes beside photos of rented sports cars appears to be the industry leader. That's not merely annoying. It can cost you customers, employees, partnerships, and opportunities. And that's what we're talking about today on Marc Haine Live. Welcome to this episode of Marc Haine Live. Of course, this is where small business owners and entrepreneurs can pick up some core skill sets to help them create the show-stopping, jaw-dropping experience that their customers and their employees deserve. I am your host, customer and employee experience strategist, Marc Haine, and I'm really glad you're here with me today because my guest today is Amy George, the no-spin story strategist. And today we are going to be uncovering how small businesses can use the stories already inside their organization to help them build visibility, credibility, and trust. I do have one request though, and I think you know what it is. Please make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. Please make sure that you follow me on social media. You subscribe to the podcast. That way you'll get notifications when I bring you fresh new content each and every week. Okay, so imagine that a potential customer hears your name for the very first time. They do what everyone does before making a decision. They look you up. They visit your website. They scan your LinkedIn profile. They check your reviews, and they search for articles, interviews, and signs that other people trust you. And within minutes, they begin forming an opinion. Not necessarily an accurate opinion, but an opinion nonetheless. And they may discover a clear, credible expert with valuable ideas and a strong track record, or they may find a unfinished LinkedIn profile, a website last updated when people were so excited about QR codes and almost no evidence explaining why your business matters. And that silence tells a story. And that brings me to our question of the day. So if your best potential customer searched for you today, would they find a trusted expert or a business that looks like it forgot to turn the lights on? Go ahead and share your experience on your favorite social media platform. I'd love it if you take the link to this show, post it on your favorite social media platform, hashtag it Experience Leadership, put your comments down and be part of this conversation because I know we all struggle with it, don't we? As I mentioned, my guest today is Amy George, an award-winning journalist, an accredited public relations professional, and the founder of By George Communications, a new savvy PR agency celebrating 10 years in business. How do you like them apples? Before entering public relations, Amy spent 13 years working as a journalist. She wrote for newspapers across the Midwest and Southeast before joining the Associated Press in New York, where she covered financial markets through the aftermath of the tech bubble and the September 11 attacks. She later created the award-winning personal finance column Out of the Red for the Charlotte Observer. Today, Amy uses her experience from both sides of the newsroom to help businesses uncover meaningful stories, earn media attention, build thought leadership, and to protect their reputation. Amy, welcome to the show. I'm so excited.
Mark, I'm so excited. That intro was incredible. This is going to be so much fun. Thank you for having me.
I love having you. Hey, so Amy, maybe can you start off by telling us a little bit about who your clients are and how are you serving them right now?
Yes, of course. So my clients really range industries, financial services, also cultural institutions. I have worked for Charlotte Ballet, Beckler Museum of Modern Art, um, small business owners, individual financial planners, healthcare, you name it. The thing about having been a journalist, I'm a quick study. The people who work with me have worked in newsrooms as well. And so we just love to learn industries, but we tend to really be in business, finance, healthcare, and the arts.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Amy, when I we booked you for the show, I started getting really curious because I know that a lot of people mix up marketing and public relations, and
Yeah.
I wanted first of all, can we start by clarifying the difference between the two?
I would love it. People ask that all the time, or they don't ask because they think, that they know. So, uh, public relations is at its core, it's about relationships and not about selling to. So it's a part of marketing. It does help people buy from you, establish relationships with you, but it's not really intended to start with transaction, if that makes sense. I mean, the
Mhm.
word relations is literally in the phrase public relations. So it's building relationships with all of the people and constituents and stakeholders who matter to you, starting with your employees, number one, and then, going outward, thinking of customers, partners, vendors, investors, if you have them. So it's building relationships with those people versus, talking at them or selling to them.
I love that because we've talked on this show about how we've kind of migrated in from the knowledge age into now this relationship age, where even with our employees, it's more than the fact that you just have employees that you're tapping into for their excellence, but it's about creating the relationship. And I love, thank you so much for making that tie in because we hear the word public relations, and I think it loses the meaning of the word because people think PR,
Right,
it's stunts, it's ways to get in people's faces and so on. And we forget that
right.
actually the idea here is we have to build relationships.
Exactly. It's no one tactic. People will also often come to me and say, I need a press release because I'm about to, announce something or do something. And a press release is a tactic, it's not public relations. And if you send out that press release with no relationships, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, Amy, am I wrong in assuming that many small business owners believe that public relations, PR as a whole, is something that they can postpone until they get larger? Because in my
A hundred
background as
percent.
okay, so I'm not on
A
track
hundred percent.
because when I talk to people, it's like, oh well, I'm just a three-man operation. I'm not Google.
Right, exactly. No, I mean, everyone needs public relations, everyone needs PR, and everyone can and should start by doing their own PR. As
Mhm.
an individual contributor in the corporate world, I had managers tell me, or I would have to remind myself, it's not enough to do the work that you love and to run the company that you love or run the career that you love. You have to kind of talk yourself up. You have to do your own PR. And so, whether or not you hire a firm or you get to that point, first of all, I believe that there is a firm out there for you no matter your size, because there are public relations firms that are small business owned,
Mhm.
like by George, for example. So whether or not you get to that point, or, I believe that you should get to that point, there's still plenty that you can do on your own that is your own PR. Like you should, no matter what, always own your own PR to some degree.
I love that. It's funny as you were mentioning that about that there are organizations like your company that deals with smaller businesses. What's the difference between a PR firm, somebody who specializes in public relations, versus hiring a social media strategist or a marketing person with a heavy hand in social media?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question because I would say, you might have your large scale public relations firm that does it all, and then you might have a firm like mine where we say, hey, we specialize in certain things, right? So it would be important to know what is important to you and then to shop around for those things. If you want to hire individual, siloed people, then you're going to have to manage all of those silos of this person's doing social media posting, this person's doing my video. If you can get it all in house to one under one umbrella, that would be ideal as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it sounds to me that if you try to split it all up, then you're going to be juggling different voices, and then you're going to have a challenge on
Right.
how you're going to be muddying the water of the brand.
Right. Right. But I would say as a small business, you might not need the 20 to 30 services that a super large firm offers.
Right.
So maybe get to know a few smaller firms. And, if I were meeting with someone, I would want to know, like, is LinkedIn important to you? Because that's the number one social media channel that my team and I have experience in, that we believe in, that we can move the needle in, that we see the biggest value in. Additionally, we're very news and journalist and kind of news story driven. So if you want to get news stories in front of print industry, TV, broadcast, podcast, all of those journalists, like, that's a sweet spot for us.
Hmm.
If you want to get thought leadership published by third party, outlets, that's another sweet spot for us. But I don't do, for example, media buys. I don't go and buy advertising. I would
Right.
find someone else, because again,
Yeah.
that's, to your earlier point, that's like the marketing advertising part of it. There are some firms that do it all. They're just going to have a lot bigger price tag as well.
What do you say to the small business operator who says, let's say a pizza joint, where he says, "Oh,
Mhm.
I don't need PR. Everybody knows I make great pizzas." Um,
Mhm.
what they figure that because they have a core group of people who know them, that they're a-okay. How do we
Mm.
shake that reality to make them understand that you're losing opportunity?
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind immediately with what's been going on would be like, well, I hope no one gets, food poisoned from the salads that you might also be serving, right? With this lettuce thing that's been happening, like, things happen, like, you employ people. That has nothing to do with the lettuce. Anytime you employ people or serve a product or, a service, something can go wrong. And
Hmm.
it does not even have to be of your doing. It could be the pizza joint down the street had
Yeah.
an issue, and so, no matter what, I think you need to kind of let yourself imagine some worst case scenarios. What are the worst things that could happen if I don't have any PR or any whatever,
Right.
let your head go to some bad places, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, what would happen if we had a recall? What would happen if an employee brought their domestic situation into our business? What would
Hmm.
happen? How would we handle it? Who would we talk to?
Mm.
um, and there's a bad Yelp review, that's one thing. And then there are probably way worse things than just one disgruntled, my pizza wasn't hot
Right.
situation. Like, that's not a crisis. Like, let's identify what a crisis is. And where the relationship part comes into all of this is, if you've never built relationships with influencers, food people, grocery store vendors, reporters, whatever, you're going to have a lot harder time saying, no, no, that's, we're very safe, or we're very this or that. Like, it's harder to get that message out because people don't know you.
Right.
Whereas if there's a reporter who's been covering you from the time that you opened, and now you're on your third generation or whatever the thing is,
Hmm.
well, maybe that wouldn't be the same reporter, but you get what I'm saying. Or the same food blogger has whatever, and you've like donated to food pantries and you've done all this stuff and you're out there, then people are more likely to remember, like, oh, okay, we can trust, like, everyone has a bad day, or anyone could, buy bad produce, or,
Hmm.
they're just more
Well,
likely to trust you, and then kind of forgive and maintain their relationship with you.
so what I love about that was you use the magic word trust, because it is about this idea of building trust. And at the same token, what you're also talking about is public relations in the guise of our crisis plan, that we have to have some semblance. As a small business, you have to have a plan of what happens when stuff hits the fan. I mean, up here in
Yeah.
Canada, we had like 4 days where one of our internet providers went down for 4 days,
Hmm.
and the business weren't prepared for it. The banks weren't prepared for it. So people would say, on their store windows, cash only. And it's like, you go to the ATM, the
Right.
ATM doesn't work. Right. And so all of a
Right.
sudden people started, and it's like, well, find the little credit card slips. Use those little mini slips that we used to have when we used to encode the right.
Right.
Have as we build businesses, we have to look at every aspect of our business and say, what happens if this
Mhm.
fails? If you have a
Exactly.
cappuccino machine and the cappuccino machine fails, what's your plan B with making cappuccinos?
Right.
Are you just going to say we don't have
Right.
cappuccinos, or are you going to have a machine in the back that you can plug in? Right.
Right.
But then
Right.
the same thing is true with this idea of, we go into business and our reputation is key. But if we're not actively telling some of those stories, I think the reputation is just going to form on its own, won't it?
Oh, if you're not telling your story, someone's going to fill in the blanks for you. And, you better hope that you like what they say, but it's out of your control.
Right.
Yeah, so you have to, that is the owned part of media. There's paid media, advertisements, things that you have total control because you pay for that. There's earned media, talking to reporters, you don't have control. And then there's owned, where again you have control of your blog, your website, um, your LinkedIn. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's all trust.
it's interesting because, like, as you said, even talking to journalists and stuff, I
Mhm.
if you're a person with a welding shop, right? I think a lot of people would go, I have nothing to talk to a journalist about. What am I going to talk to a journalist about?
Right.
But we had a local welder who, during the crash in 2018, the oil crash in 2018, he had all these welders and stuff. He had to lay off most of his staff, but then he started making fire pits.
Oh,
And
cool.
so he ended up hiring back 5 of his welders, and they used the
Yeah.
actual pipes that they used for the oil pipes, or whatever they call them, and
Hmm.
he actually cut them, and then he made them into fire pits with nice designs along the sides and everything, and it was
Right.
brilliant. And then the media was all over it. The media was like, "Hey, here's a guy who's pivoted during this huge crisis,
Hmm.
making these fire pits that, all these major retailers, including Costco, wanted."
Right.
Right? And
Right.
it's like,
Right. Right.
what a way to
Yeah.
pivot a business and be public
Yeah.
about it, that people turn around and go,
Right.
this is a business I think I want to do business with.
And what's interesting about that story is people think like what makes a good story is something that's happy like that. And that is so true. But it's like a comeback story, it's a turnaround story, it's a rising from the ashes, no pun intended story. So I always say, just on the like looking ahead to, I know we might talk about what makes a good story, but
Yeah.
what makes a good story is a little counterintuitive to people. It starts with tension. It's like, fixing, something has to be wrong. Someone has to be the underdog in order to rise or whatever that is. So that just struck me in that story that, you know, there is tension
Hmm.
and that's a
So,
good thing. It's not just all shiny happy.
right. And I think a lot of times this is where I think people hang their PR hat on, is they go, oh, you know what? It's a major holiday. We're going to go down to the park and we're going to have hot dogs. Let's do a press release. And it's
Right,
like,
exactly.
who cares? Everybody does that, right? There's nothing bad
Right,
about it.
right, right,
But
right,
I,
right.
if a business is not focused on kind of their reputation or how the public reputation side of it, are there any warning signs that a business has neglected its visibility or credibility and it's hurting them?
Oh, I mean, for sure. The opening story that you gave, where you had mentioned, you're not getting noticed, but your competitor who's posting kind of so-so content is. So I think warning signs would be uh, your website hasn't been updated in years. You're not able to clearly communicate what you do. The people, your customers, they might not be your best referral giving your best referrals because they can't communicate what they do. They know they like you, but they don't know how to put it into words. Your LinkedIn hasn't been updated. I see lots of small businesses that do not have a LinkedIn business page, and that is a huge misstep. I would not hire a small business that did not have a business page because there are
Hmm.
plenty of others that do.
Yeah.
Individual CPAs. Maybe they're like a 3 CPA firm. You're not going to do my taxes if you don't have. a business page on LinkedIn because I'm just not going to take you seriously.
It's
So
interesting because
that's
as
a
you're
warning sign.
yeah, so because part of it is, I think as human beings, it's not only about building the trust, it's also looking for values. It's also looking, are
Right.
our values aligned? Are they talking about the same thing that's important to me and my
Right.
community and my bubble, the world that I live in?
Right.
And I think a lot of times, interestingly enough, what I see a lot of things happening is I see a lot of people on their business pages or even on their professional branded page, start talking about things they really shouldn't be talking about if they want to encourage
Right.
customers to be coming into their businesses.
Right, right. Well, that's the thing. People ultimately do business with people. That again is the relations part of
Yeah.
public relations. So they might be posting things that they shouldn't post. That's bad. But they also might not be posting at all, or they might take themselves too seriously and kind of neglect a whole area of content. Like I'll give one example. I post all the time on LinkedIn about what I'm reading, my favorite books of the month, the quarter, what I do, roundups. I love books. They're a big part of like what makes Amy George, Amy George. My first job was in my public library. My first communications job was for a major book company. It's who I am. Plus, I just love to read. But none of my books are like business and development. I hate that. I'm not right. I'm not reading about PR. I'm not reading about how to lead a small business. No self-help, none of that. But that's good. People meet me and they're like, well, what did you think of that Booker Prize winner? Or what did what's the best book of the year? What did you think of that New York Times Booker review? Or you have to give people like some icebreakers, like some humanity, some reason
Hmm.
to want to get to know you. And I think that goes also beyond the transactional. I'm not going to show up on LinkedIn and just sell PR all the time.
Hmm.
I want people to know what they get with me, which is we're going to chat about books every now and then, or or whatever, or my kids, or growing up in the Midwest, or having a typewriter. How many people can say they have ever owned a typewriter at this in the year 2026? People are going to like know me, that I love to travel. I'm going to ask questions. So I guess that's just kind of a long-winded way of saying that you also have to pay attention to your brand and what's important to you, and putting it out there in a way that is, I hate the word authentic because I believe in showing in that way versus telling
Hmm.
people I'm authentic. No, I'm going to post about books because that is me being authentic. I'm showing you, not telling you. So I'm just a big fan of like icebreakers and giving people some humanity,
I
giving
love that.
people a reason to want to know you.
And so that's, I mean, a perfect segue into our next segment. So I'd love to dig into some actionable steps that the listeners can take
Yeah.
to become more strategic with their communications and how they think around their public relations and their brand. And we'll get to that right after this.
When the spotlight shines on your business, are customers applauding or yawning? In other words, how is your business performing? Make your business a star with the new book, Lights, Camera, Action: Business Operational Excellence Through the Lens of Live Theater by Marc Haine. Marc uses his business and acting experience to help you see your business like a live show, so you can create a performance your customers will never forget. Buy Lights, Camera, Action today at your favorite online retailer or directly at marchaine.com.
Welcome back. I am speaking with the no spin story strategist, Amy George. Amy, you had a client who operated successfully for more than 20 years before investing in public relations. What changed
I
when they
did.
finally began telling their story publicly? What happened to their business?
I I I mean, first of all, she loves it and she feels so much more confident in her story and what she's doing. And what's changed is she's getting out there. In just a few months' time, she's had several national media interviews, local TV interviews. There was one in which immediately after this local TV interview, a prospect called her and said, I and booked a meeting. It was just amazing. So I think it's validating. You don't. It's validating of her work. It was on her to-do list for a long time, and she realized she couldn't do it on her own. there are some things she can do. She does her own LinkedIn. She does a good job. She does a great job. But she couldn't do, there are a lot of things you can do on your own, but it's hard to book your own TV and then know how to
Hmm.
do the interview and to do it well. All of the media part, I would say that is the hardest part of the doing it on your own. And she finally was just like, I want to do it. I'm scared to do it, but I'm going to do it. And now she's just like, why didn't I do this a long time ago?
Right. It's interesting
Yeah,
because when you think about trust and validation in your business, getting onto a news show or a breakfast show on a major network, that's like a slam dunk. It's like nobody can really ignore that. And you can then cross use that footage into your social media to prove to people, hey, guess what? I was on ABC or
exactly.
I was on NBC or whatever.
Right.
You mentioned in your notes that credibility must be built before you need it. What does that look like in practice?
Well, one area again, and not to sound like a broken record, would be to start on your LinkedIn, right? I mean, like I'm such a big LinkedIn proponent, but when I was a reporter, before I would interview, like say a financial planner, I would look at their LinkedIn to see like, okay, what do they have to say? Maybe my topic might be taxes. Do they seem like they know a lot about taxes or whatever it would be, right? I would at least
Mhm.
make sure they were on there, and are they worth talking to, or should I, keep looking? So you can build your credibility by posting on LinkedIn, by writing articles. Like you said, people have more content than they think they have. My notes for this podcast alone, I've saved them because I'm like, oh, there's some good nuggets in here. I can be posting these on LinkedIn, and I'm going to do that. So, like, if you start to think about all that, you prepared for a client presentation. Well, take some of those, turn them into Canva graphics or LinkedIn post and get them on your website, your LinkedIn. Like you have more content than you think. You can write a LinkedIn articles, a newsletter, an employee newsletter. You can slice and dice your content in so many ways that it kills me when people don't see it, and maybe they're on TV and then they do nothing with it. It's
Yeah,
like no one knows if they weren't sitting at that exact moment watching that exact program.
it's gone.
eh, but because you never reposted it, put it on your website as featured in, no one knows.
Yeah.
Like share it early and often.
So for the people tuning in, are there any strategies they should be aware of about their business that they could say this would make really good stories on LinkedIn, or this would be really good? Because I think business operators and entrepreneurs get really confused about this whole idea of storytelling for their business. Because
Right, right,
I think what happens is you get a business operator and he goes, I just do what I do. I don't. There's no story here. But to the
right.
outside world, it's completely different. One of the things that I fell into was a gentleman in the States. I can't remember where he is, but he has a donut shop. And so
Mhm.
one of his team encouraged him to do these video shots at 3 o'clock in the morning as he's prepping donuts and stuff. And
Making
but
the
it's
donuts. What was that
making
commercial in the
donuts,
80s? Making the
right?
donuts.
And that's
Yeah,
that's all he's doing is he's making donuts, he's making long johns, and he's talking a little bit about it, but then people are engaging and asking questions about, oh, how much sugar did you use, or what do you do with the leftover dough, and like I mean, it's amazing to see the traction he's
amazing.
getting just by first thing in the morning setting up a camera and some or one of his staff members recording him, and he's just doing the work.
I love that. People love behind the scenes. They like
Hmm.
feeling like they can see something that people are curious. They want to know how much sugar or how big is that mixer. Like if you see like an industry, like that's
Yeah,
kind
it's
of cool.
huge.
So yeah, people love going behind the scenes. I used to take reporters to the costume shop at Charlotte Ballet to see the production behind the production of like nutcracker costumes or whatnot. And that would be in the summer. People aren't even thinking about it, except they are there. People love behind the scenes. So I think to answer your question, you kind of have to tap into like your own curiosity. I think sometimes like we forget to be curious, we forget to
Mm.
ask questions, we take for granted like that we love what we do and what's right in front of us. And so we take for granted all the stuff we know, but that other people don't know about how the sausage is made or the donuts are made or
Yeah,
whatever. So uh, th- starting with like just a curious, fresh, open mind. And that is why hiring a PR firm, some
I was just
outside
going to say
eyes
that.
can help you do that. And you don't have to be married for like life. You could also just say, can you help me with this project? Or
Yeah.
we go in and we've trained clients who have small teams on how to do their PR better. So, we'll work with them for a few months and help them see all the stories within their organization. And then they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And then we let them go do. And then that's what they do. They go and do.
It's interesting because, we've said on the show many times, you can't see the label from inside the bottle. And that's exactly what you just described. I think we get so used to what we do that we think it's no big deal. It's just work. It's not no big
Right.
deal. But to the
Right.
outside world, it could really be that kind of build. I mean, I remember back in the 80s, I was consulting for a young man he would go in and he would calibrate TV sets. And he wanted to open up a brick and mortar to open up a TV and stereo shop, and he didn't know how he would compete with the bigger brands that were out there. And one of the
Hmm.
things that we did on the onset, which I think was at the time, now looking back on it, was actually like ahead of its time. It's like, why don't you invite people to come for coffee and donuts, and then you can tear apart a particular technology and show people how to use it? Right.
I
And
love
this was
it.
before
Yeah.
YouTube, right? And I
Right.
mean, he
Right.
used to at first he only got like 3 people showing up, but then,
Right.
4 months in, I mean, he had to rent chairs in order to fit
Right.
the showroom so that he could have a stage that he could show these people what was going on. And so the interesting thing about that was, you become the trusted advisor because people see you, they talk to you, they see what you're doing. And because of that, the next time they want to buy a TV or a stereo, who were they going to?
I love that. And donuts
And
again.
don't, yeah,
This
right.
is like the donut episode. No, but that also reminds me, on LinkedIn or your blog or where whatever, I also believe in like kind of giving away your expertise. Not everyone would agree on that, but coming from this like desire to help, which is
Yeah.
what you were kind of talking about with that guy, telling them how to do it. I've written so many articles on how to do LinkedIn, every angle, or how to do your own PR, or how to talk to reporters. And because I do, I mean, that's why I liked being a journalist as well. I liked
Hmm.
telling people things that they didn't know, news that they could use, news you can use. Like that's the thing. Um, and people will do it or do it themselves, or they will trust that you know what you're talking about
Yeah.
and they will work with you.
I love that.
So,
Hey,
yeah,
so, so Amy, for the people tuning in that this might be resonating for, could you just let everybody know how they can get in touch with you in case they want to work with you?
well, yes, of course. So I'm Amy Baldwin George on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
I also have a LinkedIn page for By George Communications, and my website is bygeorgecomms.com.
Lovely. Lovely. So Amy, how do you tell? And so for people who are stuck, they're stuck in their kind of bubble. How can one tell a compelling story without the over exaggerating, the oversharing, or slipping the whole messaging into spin?
Oh, well, to start with this, to start and end with the truth is the best policy. I mean, that's why I say no spin, because good PR really is the truth. I don't believe in spin. So start with the truth. Don't overpromise. Don't say things that you can't do or can't verify.
Hmm.
As a journalist, I'm very skeptical of whenever someone says, we're the first or the only of its kind in whatever.
Award
You don't
winning.
need award winning, correct. You don't need those things, and they beg attention that you might not want, right? Just start with the truth and keep it very simple and tell a story. I mean,
Hmm.
it sounds simple. I do believe that it can be simple, but being honest, telling the truth, and the telling the truth, it's in everything. I will say, and I see in small businesses a lot, this use of, even doctoring photos. Let's Photoshop a new team member in. Let's Photoshop a team member out because we've had turnover. And no, you need to have another photo shoot, or you need to have evergreen photos. But even your images, like, it's not just your words that matter. It's the whole, it's the everything. And so these things that you think might not matter, oh, it's innocent enough, we'll just Photoshop this person into our team photo. It's bad. It's a bad look, literally. And people will not trust you because of it. So
And that brings up a really interesting twist on this conversation, because AI now is everywhere. AI
mm.
is our copywriter. It can produce our pictures. It could do all sorts of stuff. Is there any cautionary you would have about leveraging the power of AI when it comes to
Oh
representing our brand?
gosh, we'll have to have a whole another hour
Episode
long
just for that?
podcast for that. But my cautionary is obviously to fact check it and to use it, uh, maybe more for an idea generator. Like, I might put a headline in and kind of do like an A/B test, like, here's my headline, what am I not thinking of, and see if I
Mhm.
like the AI headline more. I
Yes.
use it almost like a
Brainstorming.
brainstorming
A
partner.
writer's note.
Yeah. Right. Because I work by myself. I have a team, but we're all remote. I think of it as like being in the newsroom when, we were all in our own cubes and you could just shout across the way and be like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And everyone's talking to everyone in the newsroom. Eh, So I look at it that way,
Mhm.
or cleaning up my notes or things like that. But I think there's some AI fatigue that's happening. So, I don't use it to like sum up meeting notes and send them around to like my whole team or my client, because if you were in the meeting, you don't need my notes and you
Right.
don't need AI to clean them up.
Right. Yes.
And I think if you're not a writer and you're using it to be a writer and you already don't know what you don't know about the writing, that makes me nervous for you.
Yeah. 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 It's
Yeah.
kind of like saying, "Oh, I know that to do open heart surgery, I need a scalpel, I need some rib spreaders,
Right.
and access to the heart. Let's see if I can make it work."
Yeah. Yeah. Let me just pull up a video. I'm sure all will be fine. Right.
We're seeing tons and tons of kind of fails when it comes to AI. We recently in Canada had somebody in the legislation kind of read off their thing, and then they started reading the AI prompt on it. AI said something like, here's a version that is going to be more people centric for the legislation,
Right.
blah. And he actually read it all out, and so now he's under hot water like nobody's business. So this idea of building in our values and using it as a means to build trust, it would be fair to say that if we do anything that's opposite of that, so any shortcuts, anything that's not authentic and truly us, would kind
Right.
of help crash that belief system.
Uh, uh, I couldn't say it better. I agree
Yeah.
100%. So, but it does start with like knowing your values and the truth that you want to tell, right? And I
Yes.
don't think there are shortcuts around that.
No, and again, the more you say that, the more again it all kind of falls back on bringing somebody in who's an expert who can see stuff that we don't see. Would it
Right.
be fair to
Right.
say that talking to our customers can help open up that portal a little bit? Talking to our customers and seeing what they
I,
see about our business?
yes, I think that is absolutely like a great idea. I don't want to say I would take it with a grain of salt, but yes, talking to your customers, but I wouldn't let them alone dictate your values. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
that should still come from you.
Yeah.
But asking customers about their experience and things like that, 100%.
Okay. So
I
I'd
think
I'd
that's a
love
great
to get
idea.
into I'd love to get into some like pitfalls and cautionaries as people tune into this. My fear obviously is
Yeah.
that, people who don't necessarily have the skill, they come up with the idea, they go, "Oh, this is really a good idea. I should build this into my strategy and I should just do it." And I want to be really clear with some pitfalls and cautionaries, and we're going to get to that right after this.
When you're delivering an important speech to a huge audience, it's easy to lose your place or go way over time. Give yourself an advantage with the Pro Speaker Presentation Speech Timer app. No more checking your watch or calling for time. The Pro Speaker Presentation Speech Timer app keeps you on track with easy-to-see timers, even changing color for visual prompts during your speech. And you can set audio cues to practice, or set it to vibrate so you don't even have to look. Be the pro you know you are. Download the app at speakerpresentationtimer.com.
Welcome back. I hope you're getting tons of value from today's episode. As you can tell, Amy and I are on a mission to support businesses just like yours. So if you belong to an organization that could use our help, or you or someone you know might be planning something like a leadership retreat, a conference, a franchise conference with people, anything that has training leaders or training business operators to make their businesses better, know that we're available. We'd love to explore how we could be of service to you and your people. So don't be afraid to reach out. We're accessible, which is great. So Amy, we talked a little bit about people doing this all on their own. At what point does do-it-yourself PR become risky, inefficient, or actually more expensive than actually bringing a professional in to do it?
Well, I think the more expensive part harkens back to the beginning about the opportunity cost of people not knowing about you, losing customers, losing out on business you might not even is yours for the taking kind of thing. You should hire someone when you know you can do more and you want to know more and you're ready to put some time and money to it. Um, I, I I don't know any other. When I guess to Mark, I would say it's those things like, gee, I want to talk to reporters, but I don't know how to make that happen. I've been writing a blog. I've been keeping up my LinkedIn. I think my website's pretty good. I'm ready for this next thing. And it so happens I'm unveiling a new product or service, or, opening a new facility or whatever that is. Or maybe it's like, I don't have time to do my own social media, and I would also like to do videos, or I would like to write articles that appear in my industry's trade publication.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of when you have things, or I have a team. We don't know I have a PR and marketing, a small PR marketing team, and they they need to be kind of next leveled, like someone needs
Yeah.
to come in and teach them her ways. I would be someone who would love to do that, and I have done that. So when you kind of just want to take it to the next level.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I've been around the block with a bunch of small business owners who might have a marketing manager. And then they expect that the marketing manager is also going to be their social
Mm,
media strategist and also the PR person and doing all
right,
this stuff. And it's like there's not enough hours in the day. Like you're talking about
right,
multiple different technicalities within the
right.
confines of under marketing, and expecting one person to be able to do all this stuff. It's
It's
like
it's too much.
how do we
It's too
become
much.
reasonable?
Oh gosh, I don't know. One project at a time. One idea might be what keeps you up at night about your PR or lack of PR or marketing, and tackle that. I heard a client recently say that what keeps them up at night is how their employees feel and their employee culture. Well, like, okay, what about a communications plan? And again, all communication should start from within, because employees don't want to hear news about your company not from you, from the outside. So what is an employee communications, internal communications plan that you could execute, maybe with an outside partner who could get your newsletter started for you, or, you know, employee spotlights or videos, or getting employees in front of media when they have a good story to tell. So that's one example. What keeps you up at night when it comes to your PR, marketing, communications? Start there. Maybe it's
Mm.
crisis. Maybe you're like, I don't know who would talk to reporters if something happened. I don't know. I don't know what our message would be. I think we would need a week to think about it, when the crisis happens. Well, yeah, that's not going to work well. And when the crisis happens, if you don't have something to say right away.
It's too
That's
little,
as
too
bad
late.
as the crisis. Yeah. So
It's
what keeps
interesting
you
that
up
you
at
said
night?
that.
That's where I would start.
I remember back in the 90s, there was a restaurant chain in Montreal that they got shut. One of their locations got shut down by the health board, and the owners were livid. Like the owners of the whole brand was absolutely livid. They went into that
Mm,
restaurant, they tore it apart, they fixed everything, and then they went on to this really great PR trail where they started talking about how important all this was. That this was a one-off situation, and that they challenged they challenged the public. If you're in our restaurant, if you ever want to tour our kitchen, just let the managers know. It doesn't matter what time of day, you can tour
mhm.
our kitchen. We will prove to you how clean we are. And I just thought when it came to trust building, this was absolutely brilliant the way that
No,
they did this. And because of that, they're still in existence 30 years later.
oh, I mean, that's incredible. Yeah, that's an example of doing it right,
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
it's interesting.
Um,
So for the people tuning in, if people are looking for, if they think,
mm,
this whole idea, I don't, again, we're small business people, we have no idea how to hire a PR professional. What should they be
mhm.
looking for in order, if they wanted to hire a PR professional or an agency? What are some of
Right.
the things they need to be asking themselves in order to make sure they're not going down a money pit?
Right. I mean, it's a lot. I would start with asking your circle, if there's someone else, if your accountant or financial planner, if you see them on LinkedIn or the news, a friend of yours, someone in your social network, I'd ask, how did you do that? And, you know, who are you working with? I've a lot of my clients have come from other small organizations or small business owners who have they've they're out there, and so then their circle wants to know, how is it that you're out there? How is it that all of a sudden your LinkedIn is amazing? Like
Hmm.
what's happening here? So I would start with asking around, and I would become very clear, because you are a smaller business, what is it that you think matters to you? And is it media? Is it your social media? Is it in talking to your employees and making sure, is it a crisis that could be looming? So that way when you do talk to a firm, it's not just like, I need PR, I need some press releases, because press releases are super expensive and super not targeted most of the time, and usually a money pit. Like, I try to discourage clients from doing press releases. They take a long
Interesting.
time. They don't yield much return from what I can tell, and yeah, they're expensive to write, to put on the wires, to distribute. They take a lot of everyone's times, and they're a tactic, you
Yeah.
know. They are, at the end of the day, a tactic. So be very clear on what it is you want and think you need, and then ask a lot of questions, because your PR person should also be asking a lot of questions.
So people tuning in, they really want to get on this now. What are the pitfalls and cautionaries? Like where can this
Oh
go off the
gosh.
rails and cause them a ton of problems?
Off the rails. Oh, there's so much. Uh, One is, if in addition to being ready time wise and budget wise to make this investment, you have to also make sure that you're accessible, and that your team, your people are accessible. Your PR people, they can't. We're not crystal ball readers. We can't uh, get to know your people, find your stories, if we don't have access to your organization. So just, it's kind of like the kitchen tour you were talking about, right? You have to trust your PR person. And I've worked with companies where I know they're not telling me the whole story. They're hiding their bad stories from their PR person,
Mm.
because they are afraid of telling anyone. But your PR person is really your conscience, and the conscience of your organization. So a pitfall would be, I'm going to hire this firm, but I'm not going to tell them the whole story. And I'm not going to give them access to our leaders or our people or our team, because I want to control, control, control.
Mm.
Well, something is going to happen that's outside of your control, a crisis or something, and then your PR person or firm, they don't know enough to help you.
It It's really
So,
interesting,
yeah,
isn't it? Because part of that is, oh, I want to make absolutely sure people see the good side of it, but then we become really public about it, and there are going to be people out there who've had experiences who's going to call you out on the BS.
right. Yeah. You have to start with the truth, and that includes with telling the truth to your PR person,
Yeah,
and when I meet with people, I'll be like, so what's the worst that can happen? Like, what do you not want reporters to ask you now or ever? And like let's fix that, or let's talk about why that is, or just let's have that on our radar. But what's the worst that can happen? Or what do you think is real, what's really happening here? Like you have this contingency of people and they're complaining and they're very vocal. What are they really upset with you about? Like, let's
right.
like talk about that. um so yeah, I think that's a big pitfall, is you have to be ready for it. You have to be ready for the PR on every level. And another reason why you want to start with the truth and tell your PR person the truth is you can't have your PR firm out there pitching you for stories and there's some secret mess that's brewing, and then you get media attention at the exact wrong time, because sometimes PR is also being quiet. It's not lying, but it's maybe laying low.
And there's so many
So,
examples of this. Jared with Subway, right?
mhm.
Like what did that do to the Subway brand? Right?
Right,
When the
right.
stuff came out, like,
Yeah,
but not that Subway might have
yeah,
known it. I'm sure they didn't know it, but
right,
there's so many different things,
right,
so many different influences on our business that could really turn
right,
around and go, can we
right.
still trust this business?
Well, a couple years ago, Crockpot had an unexpected crisis. Crockpot, like the
Hmm.
safest, most mundane brand there could be. And I wrote a column about this for Inc. I was a columnist for Inc., which is the small business publication at the time. The deal was, in the episode on the night of the Super Bowl, a crockpot ends up killing off a beloved character of this NBC hit show called This Is Us. And Crockpot at the time had no social media, they had no Facebook, they had no nothing, but people were taking to Twitter saying they were throwing their crockpots away. Not their slow cookers, their crockpots, because crockpot is like the Kleenex of
Yeah.
the slow cooker
Pressure,
world, right?
pressure cookers
Right.
and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was impressive though. Within hours, they had a Twitter account that was the exact right tone of like, oh my goodness, we loved this character too. We're so sorry. But trust your crock pot is safe and will not start a house fire. And, a link to FAQs and things. It was beautiful. Now, of course, like they have like a parent company, and they are, able to pivot and do that very quickly. And they did. So I think that's like just an example of how a small business could be thinking of like, okay, how would I very quickly pivot and get things going if the worst that I imagined happened actually happened?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of my most popular keynotes presentations that I do is to the hospitality industry, is how to respond to harsh online reviews, because it's amazing to see when people get slammed on social media, how defensive they get and how their ego gets in
Right.
the way and they go to war with their customers. And it's like, but it's a simple process. We could actually turn this into an opportunity to make you
Right.
sound like you are so great at what you do, right? Even though
Right.
somebody just slammed you on social media.
Exactly, exactly. And sometimes it's about like knowing when to stop looking backward and to start. And there is the apologizing, or
Sure.
whatever that is, of course. But when do you stop that and start looking forward? Because if you're also not giving the market, the journalist, the customers something else to turn the conversation, to take, again, that's not lying. It is just changing the conversation, but you have to have material in which to do that. But at
Right.
some point, you start to look forward instead of backward, or else that conversation is going to stay stuck in the past.
Well, and as long as the forward focused conversation is not empty promises, right? Because that's going to
Right.
destroy even more trust somewhere, and people
Exactly.
just won't rebound from that.
Right. Right. No, it has to be truth, which is, which is why I refuse to, I bristle when people call it spin.
Mhm. It's interesting. We had a topic, something pop up on our
Mm,
screen here. I want a company that spends its money on making the good services I'm buying as good as possible, rather than on PR people. Oh, that's a really
hmm.
good point. Um,
Yeah.
Having said that, Taco Bell had to weather the storm. They were a pretty
Hmm.
respectable company, and they had to weather the storm over this big diarrhea thing that happened. And
Yeah.
yet, the way that they handled it, the way they talked about it, the way they kind of addressed it, I think was really important. So, in spite of the fact that you might have somebody who's doing really good work, stuff happens, to your point.
Right. Right. Stuff happens. And I totally hear what this person is saying, but I would say it's the PR people within an organization or on behalf of an organization that are often pushing for like, hey, what's the safety data? What's the information that we can get out there that will
When you're
help.
delivering an important speech to a huge audience, it's
What can we do that will help make customers' lives better, their experience better, and that is truthful. And PR people often push organizations to do better and be better. And you know, we aren't getting noticed for that, but we're happy to see when that happens. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
we're often like also the biggest fans of these organizations. I love the companies that I've gotten to work for, and I want the best for them. And I love when I'm sitting in an audience and I hear someone say, this is my first time at the ballet, or I'm at the museum, and people are like, I can't believe Charlotte has a museum as cool as this. Like, we want the best for our organizations and for the people who experience those organizations. So, my, I guess, rebuttal, if you want to call it that, to that notion is the PR people are in the background pushing companies to be honest with you and to do the right thing and to up their game and make a great experience and to listen to you and highlight you and all of those things.
Would you say that part of that process as well is that they're the master listeners as well?
Yes, yes. The master listeners, the question askers, the listening across the board. Leaders might just be talking and listening to other leaders, but that goes back to the access I was talking about too.
Yes.
Getting to go into the kitchen or behind the curtain, talking to everyone, and being curious about how every single part of this process comes together and the people doing it.
Love it.
Yeah.
Amy, this has been such a great conversation. Could you just remind everybody one more time how they can get a hold of you?
Of course. Please find me on LinkedIn, Amy Baldwin George, by George Communications. And my website is bygeorgecoms.com. And Mark, I can't believe it's over. This was so much fun.
It went so quickly, isn't it?
It did, in a blink. Thank you for having me.
And I want to thank Elongated Muskrat for putting his comment in, or her comment in. That was great. As we wrap
Yeah,
up, do you have any
love it.
last thoughts about what we've talked about today?
I would just say everyone deserves PR, or to be curious about PR, to do their own PR. And I just think everyone has a story, and I want to hear as many stories as possible. And I hope to hear yours. And just, yeah, keep doing what you're doing and what you love doing. And don't count out PR until you get, big enough, because you're worth it right now.
I love it. Amy, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you being here, sharing your
Oh my
knowledge. I
gosh.
love your expertise. I love your passion behind it all. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you for doing this.
Mark, thank you so much.
Hey, and if you have any questions about today's episode, or you'd like a complimentary 30-minute brainstorming session with you and your team, feel free to book yourself on my online calendar. The link is in the show notes. It's the one marked meetwith.markhaine.com. As always, I am at your service. And if you're looking at today's episode and you're thinking you really do need some help kind of setting the tone for your public relations, that you really need to take that first step, please reach out to Amy. Obviously, she's a thought leader and a master of what she does. And so I know that she'll be happy to serve your needs as well. If you haven't done so yet, could you please make sure, you know it, you know the whole habit, right? Could you please make sure you subscribe to this podcast? Go ahead and follow me on social media. I'm publishing lots of stuff in there on my brand, markhaine.com, or under Elite Headline Speakers. Would love to hear your comments, your thoughts, get into a conversation. It would be my absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Marc Haine. I hope you stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope you dare to be the exception. See you next week.